The old house stood silhouetted against the moonlit sky. Its gables were like pointed teeth. The windows were vacant eyes. Harbinger Lane was aptly named. It whispered of forgotten tragedies and long-held secrets. The house, shrouded in shadows, seemed to pulsate with unseen life. It was waiting. The wind rustled the dry leaves that clung to the overgrown lawn. They scratched against the house's stone foundation like skeletal fingers. The air grew colder as the moon climbed higher. The house on Harbinger Lane watched with a silent, unsettling intensity. Mark and Sarah pulled up to the house, their car headlights cut through the darkness, momentarily illuminating the weathered facade. "It's perfect," Mark said, his voice filled with excitement. He was eager to start their new life within these old walls. Sarah, however, felt a shiver run down her spine. The house smelled of dust and decay. It was the scent of forgotten memories and long-gone lives. As they unloaded boxes, each creak of the floorboards sent a jolt of unease through Sarah. The house seemed to be watching their every move. Its silence was heavy, expectant. Days turned into weeks. Mark threw himself into restoring the old house. He revelled in its history, its craftsmanship. Sarah, however, couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She became increasingly withdrawn, her sleep disturbed by unsettling dreams. At night, the house came alive with whispers and groans. The plumbing knocked, floorboards creaked under unseen footsteps. Sarah would lie awake, listening to the symphony of sounds that seemed to emanate from the very walls. Her unease festered, growing with each passing night. Sarah's dreams were vivid, terrifying. She saw a man, his face obscured by shadow. He was always just out of reach, his presence suffocating, menacing. She would wake up in a cold sweat, her heart pounding against her ribs. The dreams felt real, like fragmented memories of a life she'd never lived. She told Mark about the nightmares, but he dismissed them as stress. He couldn't see the fear that gnawed at her, the way the house seemed to press in on her, stealing her breath. Sarah felt increasingly isolated, her sanity slowly unraveling within the walls of their new home. Section 5. The Beckoning Door. The tapping started subtly, a rhythmic thump from the basement door. At first, Sarah tried to ignore it, but the sound persisted, growing louder, more insistent. It seemed to beckon her, pulling her towards the dark heart of the house. The basement door, always locked, became a symbol of her growing terror. She would stand outside the door, listening to the relentless tapping. It was like a heartbeat, slow and steady, filled with a strange, malevolent life. Sarah knew that something lurked in the darkness beyond that door, something that wanted to be found. It was calling to her, whispering her name. Section 6. Descent into Darkness. One night, unable to bear the suspense any longer, Sarah decided to confront her fear. Armed with a flashlight, her hand trembling, she unlocked the basement door. A musty, cold air rushed out, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and something else, something ancient and unsettling. The steps groaned under her weight as she descended into the darkness. The air grew thick and heavy, making it difficult to breathe. The only light came from her flashlight beam, cutting a narrow swathe through the impenetrable darkness that pressed in on her from all sides. Section 7. The Shadow Takes Hold. The basement was vast, a labyrinth of shadows and cobwebs. The air hung heavy, thick with the weight of unseen eyes. Sarah's flashlight flickered, casting grotesque shapes on the damp stone walls. Then she saw him. He stood at the far end of the basement, his back to her. His silhouette was tall and gaunt, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. He slowly turned, and for a fleeting moment the flashlight's beam illuminated his face. It was a face etched with sorrow and a chilling, insatiable hunger. Then darkness. The flashlight clattered to the floor. Sarah screamed. Section 8. An empty cradle. Mark rushed down the basement stairs, his heart pounding in his chest. "Sarah!" he called out, his voice echoing through the vast emptiness. The only answer was the echo of his own fear. The basement was empty. Sarah was gone. He searched frantically, his flashlight beam dancing across the damp stone walls. There was no sign of Sarah, no indication of where she might have gone. The basement was silent now. The tapping stopped. The only sound was Mark's ragged breathing, each inhale a painful reminder of his loss. Section 9. A haunting melody. Days turned into a blur of grief and despair. Mark couldn't escape the oppressive presence of the house. It was as if Sarah was still there, trapped within its walls. He wandered from room to room, his heart heavy with a grief he couldn't articulate. One evening he was drawn to a room he hadn't entered before. It was a music room, untouched by time. An old, dusty piano sat in the corner. As he neared the piano, he heard it. A melody, soft and melancholic, drifted from the keys. It was Sarah's favorite song. Section 10. The lingering presence. Mark stood frozen, his blood turning to ice in his veins. The melody continued, each note a painful reminder of Sarah's absence. He was alone, yet he could feel her presence, as real and tangible as the air he breathed. He spun around, searching for the source of the music, but the room was empty. The melody reached its crescendo, then slowly faded into silence. It was then he heard it. Sarah's voice, a whisper against his ear. "I'm still here," she breathed, her voice filled with a chilling sadness. Mark was left standing alone in the silent house, his heart a heavy stone in his chest. He was not alone. The house on Harbinger Lane held on tight to its secrets, its shadows whispering Sarah's name.